Guys, today we're going to break down the physicality of a strongman. Now, I have a brand new program on the Boost Camp app right now. I'm very proud of it. It's called Fullsterkur. Any of you who know Northern European, Icelandic mythology knows the story of the Husafell stone, 400 plus pound stone. If you were able to pick it up, carry it a full length around the goat pen, you achieved Fullsterkur status or full strength status. So that is a story that's very close to strongman culture. I thought it was very appropriate for this program, the essence of which is how to gain full strength, how to reach that status and emulate the physicality of a strongman in a corporate gym. That's what we're doing here. We're trying to build the elite strength, the pressing and pulling power, the conditioning, the mobility, the explosiveness, the endurance of a strongman with just a barbell, a dumbbell, and some machines. And this is something that's near and dear to my heart because this is exactly how I trained. The first few years of training for strongman, this is what I did. Now, there's two types of people that are going to be watching this. One, you don't compete, you don't care to compete. That's perfectly fine. We have this idea of wanting strength to be useful, to be meaningful, to say something about our ability to go out in the world and be dangerous. But we also have this aversion to the idea of functional strength, mainly because of all the gimmicky bullshit that's come out over the years. This is as close to functional strength as you're going to get. It's using weights to not only increase mass and your ability to produce force, but to do so in the context of being able to do all of these other things that will allow you to pick up odd objects, to maneuver around anything, to be able to carry long distances, to be able to last, to be able to take that strength you build and have it be meaningful. Now, for those of you that do want to compete, you came to the right place because this is all based off of my experience with training in corporate gyms before I started competing, and actually for the first few years I competed before it was really easy to get your hands on good solid strongman equipment. I did a lot of movements through a lot of different thresholds that I thought would carry over best to strongman as an event, as a sporting event, and it just made me better. It set me up for success. So I'm here to tell you, if you do want to compete, not having access to equipment or not feeling comfortable running the equipment is not an excuse. You can still build the strength. You can still start to chip away at that foundation and get those qualities you need to do well in a contest. Especially nowadays, novice contests are scaled so that all of the weights are usually manageable by anybody who has something that looks like a decent strength base. And anyways, your job in your first meet, it's not to go in and slay. It's to go in, meet people, talk to the people who've been around the block, get ideas for training, learn how contests are ran, touch events for the first time. Get your feet in the water so that you get this surge of excitement about what you can do next time around and take that back to your training and then start chipping away. That's a process. I envy everybody who's facing down their first meet because it's an absolute great experience. So I strongly recommend, if you haven't considered it, I strongly recommend doing it at least once. But this is going to be your best bet for making the most out of very little. Now, what I did is I took all the strongman events, broke them into categories. This is 99% of the events that you're ever going to see at a meet that is not like the Rogue Invitational. And we categorized it by movement patterns and body types and how they kind of fit together very nicely. And we're going to go down what I think the main drivers of strength are, what the closest gym analogs are. If you don't have access to those equipments, what movements are going to set you up the best for success in that event if you are going in blind, and then accessory, just generic work that's going to kind of round out rough edges. We're going to talk about training thresholds and how to structure progression, but these are all the principles I use for preparing for top level contests. Now, before we get into that, it's been a long time since I've done a cartoony whiteboard video. We're going to break down the anatomy of a strongman, just basically break down by area, by body type, what qualities they need, what's important, what takes a back seat. Guys, if you haven't, go ahead and like and subscribe. A big chunk of my viewership are not subscribed. I'm trying to make that hard trek to 100,000. That is a number I never thought I'd be remotely close to. And I'm so appreciative of everybody that made it possible, that responded so well to the content I put out. If this channel's gotten better at all since I've been doing it, it's because I've had your feedback and your engagement. So thank you so much for that. It is greatly appreciated. Now, if you've ever wondered why every time I try to draw something realistic or to scale, it comes out hugely distorted with weird proportions and heads that are too small for the grotesque bodies, I was influenced by 1990s comic books where everything was extreme. Main reason I don't have a lot of sympathy for the eating disorders and self-esteem issues brought on by Barbie not being scaled correctly. I grew up on Rob Liefeld. If you've ever seen a Rob Liefeld comic, there is some absolutely absurd proportions, and that made up the lion's share of what comic books were back then. Anyway, so that is my influence. That's why when I do try to draw something realistic, it comes out very grotesque and very misshapen. But this is conceptual. This isn't your anatomy and physiology final, so proportions don't matter that much. So just bear with me here. So the meat and potatoes of strongman, everything that you need to know, 90% of what you need to know, comes down to this movement right here. Almost the entire sport hinges around your ability to extend your hips. Hips back, boom, hips forward. Now, any of you who have watched my deadlift videos before know that I break the deadlift, the hip hinge movement down into two parts. There's essentially everything above the waist and everything below the waist. Your erectors, your midsection, your upper back, your traps, they work to stabilize those muscle groups, keep your spine rigid, keep position so that you can move safely, but more importantly, efficiently, so you can move the most amount of weight, the most effective way possible. Everything below the hip, you're looking at essentially your glutes and hamstrings. That is what straps your torso and levers you up. That is what fires those hips through, and that's what you're doing on deadlifts, to a lesser degree on squats, but also on any time you pick anything up off the ground, on bag picks, on farmer picks, yoke picks, anytime you go to clean something or shoulder something, getting a log up to your shoulders. Actually, anytime you go to jump into a weight, hugely important on the overhead. The stronger your hips are, the more pop you can get to get that weight over your head. So the hip hinge is the backbone of all things strongman, and the demands of the events, because every event reinforces that, and because the sport selects for people that have the strongest hip hinge, you get just the nastiest deadlifters on earth. The Rogue Invitational it was like a 16-inch deadlift, but it was at 900 pounds, and they had this huge, grotesque contraption. And you had multiple guys, most of the field, getting 8, 9, 10, and I think the winner got 12 reps with 900 pounds. This is what we're talking about in terms of physicality. This is thing number one. Strongman equals strong hips. That is the most important thing. And that's tied into, of course, the posterior chain. We'll get into that. So let's start with kind of least important and go to most important. Least important, we're looking at the upper body, delts and triceps. That's going to be the most developed part of the anterior of the upper body of the strongman. And it's because our primary upper body movement is the overhead press. Shoulders have to be strong, triceps have to be strong to lock out those big weights, to handle the 280 and 300 pound dumbbell presses that routinely happen, to handle the 450 pound log presses that happen, delts and triceps. Now, going over to what you might think is a really relevant muscle group, maybe it is to most of you, but not so much the strongman, the pecs. You can see here, little sunken chest syndrome, little underdeveloped. The pecs are kind of ornamental. Now, the pecs are used in strongman, but it's more for squeezing, for crushing stones, for picking sandbags. It's useful for that, but that's a very specific type of skill, not necessarily benefited from having a really big bench press. Although there are guys that do flies and stuff to try to get their crush stronger. But the pecs do take a backseat to the delts and tris. Now, something that a lot of people don't know is the pecs are important if you're a bench presser in benching big weights, so you should do pec work. But if you have very, very strong shoulders and triceps, you can actually sport a pretty big bench press without really having to isolate your chest or worry about pec development. There's a lot of guys that are overhead specialists that can still put up big weights on a bench. However, there are a lot of big benchers that can't overhead press their way out of a paper bag. So that river doesn't exactly flow both ways, so just keep that in mind. Going down to the forearms, grip, very important in strongman, though not as much as some people might think. You can potentially be really good without having good grip. On the one hand, you have guys like Brian Shaw who can pick up the Millennium dumbbell. It's like a 230 some pound dumbbell with a fat handle, and it's just an insane feat of strength. On the other hand, you have guys like Trey Mitchell who are one of the best in the world, but can't carry anything. You know, he has kind of short, fat hands, doesn't have a good grip. There are some events that are grip specific, but the type of grip you need is crushing or is holding strength. You need this isometric strength. So that's different than working grippers. Most guys, just by virtue of strongman events, get pretty strong hands and they get good enough. But that is actually, it's important, but not to the degree that many people think. Most events don't, especially at the amateur levels, don't have a ton of grip heavy work in it. The way you set up for axles, you can work around it if you don't have a good grip. Farmer walks typically don't get that heavy. In your first couple of years of training, usually your grip is up to snuff. So if you're doing your deadlifts without straps, if you're doing a lot of upper back work rowing without straps, usually you're all right. So this isn't like training for the grip Olympics, but forearms are important. Go into the power belly. This is a main feature of strongman. This is where we see the fat man abs. You know, you're not sure if it's actual abdominals. You get that kind of Ninja Turtle belly where it looks like it's kind of like spray painted on, or it's like that type of liposuction that makes you look like you have abs. The thick waist, the thick abdominals, that is to maintain you under very heavy yoke carries and very heavy deadlifts. Not just that, but for the duration. It's like CrossFit. You see these really thick midsections because they're constantly loaded through their abdominals, and they have to do that for very long periods of time. So that's a recipe for hypertrophy. If you want that classical bodybuilding look with like a very small waist, not the sport for you, because you're really going to limit your ability to move effectively if you don't have a thick tree trunk of a waist. And again, most people don't do a ton of ab work. This is a byproduct of doing all the events over and over and over again. This brings us to quads. This is the other ornamental feature on the strongman. That's not to say there aren't guys with big quads, but squatting capacity tends to take a backseat to deadlifting capacity. I think it's important. Anything that improves your squat is going to improve your events in some capacity. But you tend to see a lot of guys with really, really strong posteriors. They have a pretty good squat just by virtue of having such a strong backside. But you don't tend to see the squatting performances as often. And that's evident by the squatting for reps. The weights are typically a lot lighter than with the deadlifts. And they don't tend to match the best squatters in the world in terms of powerlifting. So quads really important for snapping your knees and overhead presses. Important if you do a backward sled drag. I think it helps with loading immensely, but again, that's going to depend on the type of athlete you see. Now go into the backside. This is the strongman's bread and butter right here. The posterior chain, traps, lats, erectors, glutes, hamstrings. Remember, we cut everything at the waist. Erectors are going to be thick. This isn't like the loaves of bread analogy for erectors. This is like a goddamn bread bowl. Like the erectors you see on these guys, like mine tend to pop out quite a bit. The erectors stabilize, they contract isometrically to keep position. But in strongman, you're wrapping around things and uncoiling in a way that you typically don't see in the gym. So the erectors get hammered with a lot of extra hypertrophy specific work. They get thicker, and you need that for the density work, for the deadlift for reps, for all the stuff you're doing for, again, the duration. The traps and lats, huge for supporting farmer walks, huge for supporting yokes. Those are the things that keep you upright. Once the traps and then the lats go, everything dumps forward. It's like in arm wrestling. If you've ever watched arm wrestling, if guys attack the top, doesn't matter how strong your shoulders, arm, forearm is. If your wrist goes, it's a cascade effect. Everything else goes. So your leverage starts here. That needs to be rigid, then your erectors, then your midsection. And only when that is all packed in tightly can you get the most out of your glutes and hams. And then the glutes and hams, remember, those are the main movers. Those are what are doing the heavy lifting. So every time you pick something up off the ground, every time you extend into something, glutes, hams, glutes, hams, glutes, hams. You will not find a strongman with a small ass. If you're one of these guys that has a hard time getting the glutes to grow, you better figure it out, because this is the reason glutes are so big on humans and not on other animals. If you've ever taken biology and you've dissected cats, or if you've looked at like horses or any other like four-legged animal, the glutes are very, very small. We have big glutes because this is literally what keeps us upright. So if you load that and you take that duration out, that's a recipe for big glutes. I've tried to prescribe things like bag carries or keg carries for powerlifters. They hate it. They won't do it. Weighted carries are one of the best things you can do for your backside. Again, that's why strongmen get such big, thick, conditioned upper back, mid back, glutes and hammies. So let's go back to our matrix here for strongman events. This is what our training revolves around. Typically, you see a couple of barbell days, gym days, and then an event day. We're going to assume you don't get a full event day, that your work has to be done in the gym. So this is going to dictate how we arrange the big movements: squatting, pressing, deadlifting, other barbell stuff like cleans or snatches. This is going to be segmented by lift. We're going to start with overhead pressing. My best event, my favorite event, because I got these little T-Rex arms. Unfortunately, it's usually one event out of 5. It's rare to get more than one event. And getting better at overhead pressing doesn't really make you better at anything else. It's not going to make your stone load better. However, getting better at deadlifting literally makes everything better. Again, why you see such nasty deadlifts in strongmen. So overhead pressing, the staples are an axle. Presses pretty much like a barbell. Cleaning, it's a little more awkward. A log, I like to think of that like a board press for your overhead press. It's raised up a little awkward, but part of the technique and practice is getting comfortable. Once you get comfortable with a log, your potential is actually a bit higher to push weight. Guys that are really good on a log can actually move a little bit more, but you have to get over that learning curve. Then you're looking at circus dumbbell. It's an event I hate. Everybody else loves it. I'm terrible at it. Viking presses, and then odd objects. And I'm going to include things like front holds and crucifix holds, because those are essentially just deltoid isometric work. They work in very nicely into your overhead work. And you're going to be doing it for a lot of different thresholds. It could be a max weight. It could be reps. It could be a medley with different implements. It can be a clean each rep, in which case it turns into an endurance marathon. I had a axle clean and press each rep with 270 pounds. One of my best performances, I got 8 reps in a minute, which it doesn't look as blistering as it feels, but it's a pretty quick pace, especially with that weight. And that felt like I was doing CrossFit. So really runs the gamut in terms of the energy systems you're going to use, how you're going to have to train. Main driver of strength is going to be your push press. That is the default movement for strongman because you get more control. You set up with the weight. Could be a bag, could be a keg, could be a block, something really awkward, a stone press. You just need a little push from your legs and follow through with your arms. It is a better developmental tool, so more growth in your shoulders and triceps because they are relied on more heavily. But you build the skill of snapping with your knees and hips so you can potentially move a lot more weight. You just have to drill it. Guys often emphasize jerking as their main movement because in some sense your potential is higher. However, there's a trade-off. Ton of technical work required, especially if you're already strong. It's really hard to go back and rebuild those qualities. Also, much harder to implement on odder objects. You're not going to split jerk likely a dumbbell, or certainly something like a stone, a keg, a sandbag, or any of the odd things you have to press. Viking press usually forbids it. Viking press usually push press only. So I'm getting ready for a Viking press, and I'm about to hand it to the guys who have really, really good jerks, but maybe their lockout power, maybe their strict pressing power isn't quite as good. Push press for the win. You treat this like you would treat your bench press if you were a powerlifter, and you'll be all right. Jerking and push press, closest gym analog. Even if this is your main driver of strength, you can still work in your jerk as a secondary movement. I like a little push jerk to jump and then get back under it because it's efficient, it's tighter. You can do it for reps more easily. You can do it with other implements more easily. Some guys will split jerk. That's going to be your closest gym analog no matter what you're getting ready for. And then the accessory, whatever you would do to grow your upper body for benching, works well for overhead. Strict press is an accessory. That's not your main driver of strength because it can't get heavy enough and it doesn't reproduce the movement you have to do in the meet. This is accessory. Very important, very beneficial, but it's accessory. I personally don't like to mess around with Swiss bars or things guys try to use to emulate log presses. I think it's actually silly. You're not going to get your log down until you get your hands on a log. In the meantime, just focus on getting bigger and stronger. Strict pressing, behind the neck pressing is great. Lockouts and pin presses are also great. If you're push pressing, the limiting factor is going to be what you can lock out once that momentum gets taken out. So lockout work is huge. Any delt and tricep work is going to help you to grow. I really love front raises. I really love JM presses, banded tricep work, board presses, pin presses. It's all great. Moving into the meat and potatoes, deadlifting. Bar or axle is normal. The only real difference is stiffness. Axles have no flex, where sometimes you'll use an Ohio bar, something that has a ton of whip and it's entirely different, or the elephant bar that has a ton of whip. When people see straps on an axle, they're like, well, doesn't that defeat the purpose? Axle isn't used for grip in the deadlift. They used to, but it caused a ton of bicep tears. So now it's really just used as a way to make it harder. It's a little more in front of you. It doesn't flex. Really requires a ton of leg drive. Guys used to snapping into whippy bars. They get their junk knocked limp the first time they use an axle, realize that they can't yank off the ground the same way. And it's going to run the gamut in terms of height. I've done a 4-inch deficit, which puts the bar at 5 inches. 9 is normal. 9-inch bar height's normal for 45-pound plates. And 18 is usually as high as it goes. Occasionally they'll get stupid and do something higher where it turns into like a hand thigh lift. But 5 to 18 is pretty normal height. You don't see deficit that often either. So it's usually 9 to 18. But you got to be ready for anything. Front or side handle. Side handle is very common for things like car deadlifts. And that's a bit different. That's a little more quad dominant. It's more like a squat or front squat than it is a deadlift. You have to be ready for that. Trap bars are good analogs for that. And again, max, medley, or reps. And I include squatting with deadlift work because one, squatting is so rare in amateur ranks for strongman event. It does pop up occasionally. You do have to be ready, but it's rare. but also because squatting is very much a developmental accessory. I think it's very beneficial. Doesn't merit a whole ton of work on its own, and you're not going to have a good time working in squatting work, deadlifting work, and then in the future event work. So it's much easier to have just kind of a lower body day where squat work and deadlift work is done together. Deadlifting from the floor, especially on a stiff bar, and your competition squat to at least, that's parallel, guys, at least parallel. That is your main driver of strength. Just basic squatting, basic deadlifting. Of course, you're not going to do sumo because we've talked about this. It's a shitty developmental exercise, but also it's not allowed in strongman. Strongman's a Wild West. They allow suits and hitching and straps and anything to get as much weight up as possible. But a finished lift is a finished lift, and that requires your feet being together, your hands being on the outside of your legs. So exploit the developmental work, get your conventional deadlift really good, use a stiff bar so your leg drive is good. And also when you do reps, do not touch and go. I like that sometimes because it's a different training stress, but you need to be good at breaking that weight off the ground the first time. So you need as many reps like that as possible to condition that dead stop starting power. Your closest gym analog, honestly, it's going to be just a bar, whatever bar you have set to whatever height you're getting ready for. Rack pulls should be a staple because it's so common and because the overload really carries over to the other events. But whatever bar height you're getting ready for, 16, 18, 13 inches, or from the floor, or a trap bar if you're getting ready for a side handle deadlift. If you don't have access to a trap bar, I don't recommend rigging up a bunch of barbells like guys do in the gym where they got a barbell on either side and the plates are behind them. More hassle than it's worth. Just focus on getting your front squat really good. Partial box squatting is pretty good for that as well because that's more getting upright and shoving your hips through, and that's how you lock the weight out. So it's a different animal. But if you have most gyms have a trap bar. That's probably your best bet. It's also good deadlift accessory because it teaches you to use leg drive anyway. So I'm a fan of trap bar deadlifts. Accessory work, again, anything that's going to get your quads, glutes, hamstrings up to snuff. An accessory is the best opportunity to get some extra volume that's a little more easy to recover from in your rectors, mid back, upper back. So machine work is great. Back extensions are great. I did the deadlift accessory work that you're skipping, that you need to stop skipping. The video on that, Pete Rubish commented, 45-degree back extensions for the win. That guy pulled 920 at like 245. So I'm a big fan of back extensions. Reverse hypers are good. Erectors are huge in strongman. You can't get enough work. You got to get them ready for the work you're about to do. Hamstring curls and machines I'm a big fan of. For compound accessory, front squats, pause squats, and then lighter deadlift variations. Deficits, stiff leg, RDL good mornings specifically. RDL and good mornings. If you're not doing those for reps, if you're not doing them under control with a tempo on a regular basis, you're leaving gains in the tank and you're leaving preparation in the tank. So keep that in mind. Front squat, pause squat, RDLs and good mornings. Those are the best lower body accessory exercises you can do aside from the main lift, which are going to be your main driver of strength. Okay, so now we're getting into the typical events, the events that are specific to strongman. And this is where you guys might find some different recommendations, get some different ideas for what to incorporate in your training, regardless of if you're getting ready for a meet or not. Even if you're not getting ready, there's still some things you can put in that'll make you better at everything. Weighted carries and front carries are separated. The dynamics, the mechanics of them are different. The way you train for them is different. Weighted carries go very nicely together. They don't go that nicely with front carries. So weighted carry is going to be like a farmer's walk, a frame carry, or a yoke carry. And those are in 90+% of the contests you do is going to have one or the other, if not both. So that's important. Max distance races can be very heavy and grinded, can be very light and fast. Squatting, specifically front squatting, is probably going to be your best bet. It's not one-to-one. You can potentially squat a lot and not be really good at carries, but as you get practice down the road, that'll help you out. And the higher your static strength is, the bigger your potential is anyway. So that's what you're going to work on now. Rack holds, dumbbell and plate carries, those are probably the best analogs you could get in the gym. Rack holds, that's just holding weight on your back in a rack, tempering yourself to the heavy weight, getting your nervous system used to it for heavy yoke walks. You can do marches while you're doing that to get used to moving your feet. Dumbbell and plate carries. You don't need a lot of weight for your farmer's walk. There's stories about guys getting their grip really, really strong by going longer distances with lighter weights. So you don't need to go 50 feet with 300 pounds per hand. You can grab the 100-pound dumbbells, try to carry it for 300, 400, 500 feet. See what happens with your grip and you can progress that. That's probably one of the best exercises that nobody does. It'll get you ready for farmer walks. And you can do that in any gym. Holds and hangs for your grip. Again, endurance, it's just that static isometric strength. If you have grippers, don't work through them. Squeeze and hold for time. That's how you get your farmer walk grip better. Front carries and loads. This is the other bread and butter section of strongman events. Bags, kegs, stones, you're carrying them in front of you and oftentimes loading them up to a platform or loading them over for reps. The mechanics are very much the same. Pick into your lap, sit, re-grip, extend through. So you have kind of an RDL movement into your lap, and then you have kind of a Zercher / front squat movement with the weight in front of you to load it up. 8 stone carries for distance as well. Like I said, hugely beneficial for your posterior. All different kinds of thresholds from max distance. You might go 300 feet carrying for a minute plus, or they might be very fast medleys or death medleys. Squatting, Zercher and front squatting specifically, get that weight in front of you, get used to that. And RDLs are fantastic for helping with the pick, or maybe like a stiff leg, like deficit deadlift. But RDLs just do so much. I always recommend those. Zercher squats, and if you have the room, some type of walk with the weight in front of you. Anybody can stack up plates and carry them. If you have enough room, you might be able to do a Zercher walk, which also works. That's as close as you're gonna get. But I'm telling you, if your RDL is good and you're really comfortable in a heavy front squat or front squat for reps, you're gonna be set up to be a loading machine. It's just gonna be a matter of figuring out the handle. Accessory, same for your lower body. Stiff leg deadlifts, deficit if you can. Zercher deadlifts are great if you can get that low to get down and hook your elbows under. Most people can't. Any hip or back work is going to help you out. And eventually, as you get more specific, then you can actually start to incorporate actual bag runs. They're super easy to put in on GPP days or after your deadlift work. I deadlift first and then I go do my bag runs, and it feels like I just spent an hour and a half deadlifting. It's great work, easy to recover from, great for capacity, great for conditioning, makes you useful, makes you functional. Then we have all the odd classic ones that don't really fit into a group. Tire flips, finger fingers, explosive movements like throwing, a harness or arm over arm pulls. A harness pull, you're pulling forward and the truck's behind you. Arm over arm, you're sitting down and pulling the rope to you. But it's more like a leg press than an actual cable row. Backwards dragging, power stairs, etc. They're all a bit different. These are going to be, and most of these you're only going to get really, really good once you have the potential to get on them on a regular basis. If you're getting ready for a high level show, you have to drill these. You don't have an option to not drill them if you want to get good. But when you're starting out, or if you're just trying to build broad functionality, you get these better by improving your strength base, by doing a wide variety of movements. Cleans and snatches are great for tire flips and throwing events. So that's where you start to put the explosive stuff in. That's where you start to work the threshold. So you're doing cleans for, let's say, high reps, heavy, a lot of density, getting ready for those medleys that go very, very long. And again, anything that gets your deadlift, your front squat, or your press up. I mean, you need a strong upper body to walk those fingers up. You need a big front squat for those tire flips. You're basically in a 2-point stance at the start, and you're just spearing through it, and then the rest is just footwork. But that spearing movement with the weight in front of you, front squats take care of that in spades. So your big movements for strongman, basically it's going to come down to an overhead press, I say a push press, a front squat, and your primary deadlift movement. And RDL should always be present, front squat should always be present. Those are the big bread and butter movements. And if you train those for a wide variety of reps, you don't have to live and die by 10, 15, 20 reps, but it's really easy to get your strength work in, drop back, do an AMRAP, do a set of 12. Do a set of 20, test yourself, push the limits, because it's not until you're out on the field and everybody's yelling at you and you don't have the choice to stop that you feel how much a death medley sucks. It's not until then that you realize what that pain feels like. So you want to start to temper yourself to it in the gym. Don't shy away from those high reps. They're not going to set you back. They suck, but trust me when I say they make you better across the board, including in your static strength. So this is my breakdown of events for strongman, the physicality of strongman, where it comes from, how to work around, how to put all these into practice. This is all incorporated into my Fullsterkur program on the Boost Camp app. So please check that out. Very proud of the work we've done there. And even if you don't get the Fullsterkur app, because it is a premium, it is a premium program, there are so many free programs on there. You don't have to pay a dime. Bull Mastiff is digitized. You get Johnny Candido and Bryce Lewis. You get Brandon Campbell's PHUL program. You get Cody Lefevre, GZCL is on there. You get a lot of really well-known stuff. Greg Knuckles has programs on there. Great app. So I'm really proud of what's going on over there. So go ahead and check out Boost Camp. Check me out at World's Strongest Man next week. I'm going to have that link in the description. And while you're at it, go ahead and consider joining my Patreon. That is where I upload daily training stuff, including how I prep for contests, how I put this stuff into action. And that's the easiest way to get in contact with me if you have a question or just want to throw an idea out there. Patreon's the best way to do it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Also, do me a favor. I know I'm asking a lot here. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. A big chunk of my viewership are not subscribed. It would help me out. I'm making that hard trek to 100,000. That is a number that I never thought I would be remotely close to. So thank you everybody for the support. We're only getting better from here. Like I said, I'm turning out more content now. We're going to be doing this a lot more often, a lot bigger. And I can only do it because you guys are engaged. So help me out if you like and subscribe. Thank you so much, guys. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.